Marcus Thompson stood in the center of his spacious living room, surrounded by his college friends who had gathered for their monthly reunion. The 32-year-old marketing executive loved these gatherings where he could showcase his success. His expensive suit, designer watch, and lavish apartment all spoke of the life he had built for himself after graduating from business school. The evening was going perfectly until his mother, Eleanor, knocked on the door. Marcus felt his stomach drop as he saw her familiar silhouette through the frosted glass. He had completely forgotten that she was supposed to visit today to drop off some of his childhood belongings that she had been storing in her small apartment. Eleanor Thompson was 67 years old, with silver hair neatly pulled back and wearing a simple floral dress that she had owned for years. She carried a worn cardboard box in her arms and smiled warmly when Marcus reluctantly opened the door. Her face lit up when she saw his friends, remembering some of them from his college days. "Oh, Marcus, I didn't know you had company," she said sweetly, stepping inside. "Hello, everyone. It's so wonderful to see you all again. You've all grown up so much." Marcus felt embarrassed by his mother's simple appearance compared to his sophisticated friends. David worked at a law firm, Jennifer was a doctor, and Robert owned his own tech company. They were all dressed expensively and carried themselves with the confidence that came from success and money. "Mom, we're kind of busy here," Marcus said coldly, not bothering to help her with the heavy box she was struggling to hold. Eleanor's smile faltered slightly, but she tried to maintain her cheerful demeanor. "I just brought some of your old things, dear. I thought you might want them now that you have such a beautiful place." "Just put it anywhere," Marcus replied dismissively, turning back to his friends who were watching the interaction with growing discomfort. Eleanor carefully placed the box on a side table and noticed the expensive wine glasses and fancy appetizers spread out on the coffee table. "This looks lovely, Marcus. Are you celebrating something special?" "It's just a regular get-together, nothing you would understand," Marcus said sharply, causing his friends to exchange uncomfortable glances. Eleanor's eyes showed a flash of hurt, but she composed herself quickly. "Well, I should let you get back to your friends. Maybe we could have lunch tomorrow and you could tell me about your work." "Mom, I'm really busy with important things. I don't have time for lunch dates," Marcus replied, his voice growing louder and more irritated. Jennifer, who had always liked Eleanor during college, tried to intervene. "Mrs. Thompson, how have you been? I remember you always made the best cookies for Marcus in college." Eleanor's face brightened at the memory. "Oh yes, I still bake those chocolate chip cookies. Marcus always loved them so much. I actually brought some today. They're in my car if you'd like." "Nobody wants your homemade cookies, Mom," Marcus interrupted harshly. "These are successful people with refined tastes. They don't eat things from someone's home kitchen." The room fell silent. Eleanor's face went pale, and her hands began to tremble slightly. She had spent the entire morning baking those cookies specifically for Marcus, hoping to surprise him and maybe meet his friends properly. "Marcus, that's enough," David said quietly. But Marcus was just getting started. "You know what the problem is?" Marcus continued, his voice filled with cruel confidence. "Some people never learn to move on from their simple little lives. They think everyone wants to hear about their boring daily routines and eat their amateur cooking." Eleanor stood frozen, holding her purse tightly against her chest. The woman who had worked 2 jobs to put Marcus through college, who had saved every penny to help him with his education, was being humiliated by her own son in front of strangers. "I raised you better than this," Eleanor whispered, her voice barely audible. "You raised me." Marcus laughed bitterly. "I raised myself. I'm successful because I learned to leave behind the small-town mentality and mediocre standards. I learned to associate with people who actually matter in the world." Robert shifted uncomfortably in his chair, remembering how Eleanor had always treated Marcus's friends like family during college. She had invited them for holidays when they couldn't go home and had never asked for anything in return. "Marcus, maybe you should—" Jennifer started to say, but Marcus cut her off. "No, let me finish. This is important for everyone to understand. Success means making hard choices about who belongs in your life. It means not being dragged down by people who are satisfied with ordinary lives and ordinary dreams." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, but she stood straighter, her dignity intact despite the cruel words. "I see," she said softly. "I understand now, Marcus. I won't bother you again with my ordinary life." She turned toward the door, moving slowly but with purpose. Marcus felt a momentary pang of guilt but quickly pushed it aside. convinced that he was teaching his mother an important lesson about boundaries and social status. "Don't forget your box of junk," Marcus called after her, his voice dripping with disdain. Eleanor stopped at the door and turned back one final time. Her eyes now filled with a mixture of sadness and something else. Determination, perhaps, met her son's gaze directly. "Keep the box, Marcus. Consider it a reminder of where you came from, even if you're ashamed of it now." With that, she opened the door and walked out into the evening air, leaving behind a room full of people who were shocked by what they had just witnessed. After Eleanor left, the atmosphere in Marcus's apartment became tense and awkward. His friends sat in uncomfortable silence, no longer interested in the expensive wine or gourmet food. The celebration that Marcus had planned felt hollow and meaningless after the cruel display they had just witnessed. "That was really harsh, man," David finally said, shaking his head. "She needed to hear it," Marcus replied defensively, but his voice lacked the confidence it had held moments before. Jennifer stood up to leave. "I think I'm going to head home early tonight." One by one, his friends made excuses and left until Marcus found himself alone in his expensive apartment, surrounded by the remnants of a party that had ended in disaster. He looked at the cardboard box his mother had left behind, but he couldn't bring himself to open it. Outside, Eleanor sat in her old car for several minutes before starting the engine. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but her expression was resolute. Her son had made his choice, and now she would make hers. She had spent years sacrificing her own dreams and happiness to ensure Marcus had every opportunity to succeed. Now it was time to focus on herself and show Marcus exactly what he had thrown away with his cruel words and arrogant attitude. 3 weeks passed after that humiliating evening, and Marcus tried to convince himself that he had done the right thing. He threw himself into his work at the marketing agency, closing several big deals and earning praise from his boss. The success felt good, but something nagged at him during quiet moments. His friends had been distant since the party, responding to his messages with short replies and declining invitations to meet up. Eleanor, meanwhile, had spent those 3 weeks in deep reflection. She sat in her small but tidy apartment, looking through old photo albums filled with pictures of Marcus as a child. There were images of birthday parties she had organized on a tight budget, school plays she had never missed despite working double shifts, and graduation ceremonies where she had beamed with pride at her son's achievements. The woman who had once been so proud of her successful son now felt a profound sadness mixed with a growing determination. She had given Marcus everything she could, sacrificing her own dreams and opportunities to ensure he had the best possible future. She had worked as a waitress during the day and cleaned offices at night to pay for his education. She had worn the same old clothes for years so that Marcus could have new school supplies and textbooks. But Eleanor was not just a grieving mother. She was also a woman who had been underestimated her entire life. People looked at her simple appearance and modest lifestyle and assumed she was ordinary, unremarkable. What they didn't know was that Eleanor had graduated valedictorian from high school and had received a full scholarship to study literature at the state university. She had given up that scholarship when she became pregnant with Marcus at 19, choosing instead to focus on raising her child and supporting her small family. During her years as a single mother after Marcus's father left, Eleanor had continued to educate herself. She read voraciously, taking books from the library and studying subjects that fascinated her. She had taught herself about business, finance, art, and technology, always hoping that someday she might have the opportunity to use her knowledge. Now, sitting in her quiet apartment with Marcus's cruel words echoing in her memory, Eleanor made a decision that would change everything. She walked to her bedroom closet and pulled out a small wooden box that she had kept hidden for years. Inside were documents and certificates that Marcus had never seen. Her high school diploma with the valedictorian designation, letters of recommendation from professors, and most importantly, a business plan she had written years ago for a small restaurant. The restaurant had been Eleanor's secret dream, something she had planned in detail during her breaks at work. She had researched everything from menu development to marketing strategies, using the knowledge she had gained from her extensive reading and her years of experience in the service industry. She knew exactly what kind of atmosphere she wanted to create, what type of food she wanted to serve, and how to make customers feel welcomed and valued. Eleanor had saved money for this dream, putting aside small amounts from each paycheck for over 15 years. The savings account she had never mentioned to Marcus now contained enough money to make a modest start on her restaurant dream. She had been waiting for the right time, always putting Marcus's needs first, always finding reasons to delay her own dreams. But Marcus's words had awakened something in Eleanor that had been sleeping for too long. His dismissal of her as someone with an ordinary life and mediocre standards had inadvertently challenged her to prove him wrong. If her son was so ashamed of her simple lifestyle, perhaps it was time to show him what she was truly capable of achieving. The next morning, Eleanor dressed carefully in her best outfit and drove to the downtown business district. She had made appointments with 3 different real estate agents to look at potential locations for a small restaurant. As she walked through empty storefronts and imagined them filled with the warm, welcoming atmosphere she had dreamed of creating, Eleanor felt more alive than she had in years. The first location was too expensive, and the second was in a poor area with little foot traffic. But the third location was perfect. It was a small space on a busy street corner, with large windows that would allow natural light to flood the dining area. The rent was reasonable, and the previous tenant had left behind some kitchen equipment that could be refurbished. Eleanor stood in the empty space, picturing customers enjoying homemade meals and feeling the sense of community she wanted to create. This would not be just any restaurant. It would be a place where people could experience the kind of genuine hospitality and care that seemed to be disappearing from the world. That afternoon, Eleanor visited the bank where she had maintained her savings account for 15 years. The banker who helped her was initially skeptical when this modestly dressed older woman inquired about a business loan. But as Eleanor presented her detailed business plan, complete with financial projections and marketing strategies, the banker's attitude changed completely. "Mrs. Thompson, this is remarkably thorough," the banker said, flipping through the pages of Eleanor's proposal. "How long did it take you to prepare this?" "About 15 years, Eleanor replied with a small smile. "I've been thinking about this for a very long time." The banker approved a modest loan to supplement Eleanor's savings, impressed by her preparation and the viability of her business concept. Eleanor walked out of the bank feeling lighter than she had in months. For the first time in decades, she was doing something entirely for herself. Meanwhile, Marcus was beginning to notice his mother's absence in ways he hadn't expected. She had always called him twice a week to check on his life and offer encouragement. She had sent him care packages with homemade treats and small gifts. She had remembered every important date in his life and had always been available when he needed advice or support. Now the phone calls had stopped. There were no more packages arriving at his apartment. When Marcus finally called her after 2 weeks of silence, Eleanor's responses were polite but distant. She answered his questions briefly and didn't ask about his work or his life. Most unsettling of all, she seemed genuinely busy with something that didn't involve him. "What are you doing with your time, Mom?" Marcus asked during one of these brief conversations, feeling strange about not being the center of her attention. "I'm working on a project," Eleanor replied simply, "something I've been planning for a long time." "What kind of project?" Marcus pressed, but Eleanor just said she would tell him about it when the time was right. For the first time since that awful evening, Marcus felt a prick of curiosity about his mother's life beyond her role as his supportive parent. He had always assumed that she lived a quiet, unremarkable existence centered entirely around him. The idea that she might have interests, dreams, and plans that didn't involve him was both puzzling and slightly disturbing. Eleanor, meanwhile, was busier than she had been in years. She spent her days planning the renovation of her restaurant space, meeting with contractors, designing menus, and researching suppliers. She discovered that her years of experience in various service jobs had given her valuable insights into what customers really wanted and how to run an efficient operation. As she worked on bringing her dream to life, Eleanor felt herself changing. The confidence that had been buried under years of self-sacrifice was resurging. She stood straighter, spoke with more authority, and began to see herself not as Marcus's ordinary mother, but as Eleanor Thompson, a capable woman with valuable skills and important dreams of her own. 2 months after that devastating evening, Eleanor's life had transformed in ways that would have been unimaginable to anyone who knew her as simply Marcus's quiet, devoted mother. The empty storefront she had rented was now buzzing with activity as contractors installed new lighting, painted walls in warm, welcoming colors, and refurbished the kitchen equipment. Eleanor threw herself into every aspect of the restaurant preparation, with an energy and expertise that surprised everyone she worked with. She negotiated with suppliers, designed an efficient kitchen layout, and created a menu that balanced comfort food classics with innovative twists that reflected her years of experimenting with recipes at home. The contractor initially tried to overcharge her, assuming she was an inexperienced older woman who could be easily taken advantage of. But Eleanor had done her homework. She presented him with detailed quotes from 3 other contractors and a comprehensive understanding of exactly what work needed to be done. Within an hour, she had negotiated the price down by 30% and established herself as someone who commanded respect. "Lady, you sure know your stuff?" the contractor admitted, shaking his head with admiration. "Most people don't come this prepared," Eleanor smiled. "I've had a lot of time to learn." The local food suppliers were equally impressed when Eleanor visited their warehouses and distribution centers. She knew exactly what quality of ingredients she wanted, understood seasonal pricing fluctuations, and had researched the best local farms for fresh produce. Her years of grocery shopping on a tight budget had taught her how to identify quality and value. "Mrs. Thompson, you've got a real eye for this business," said Jim Morrison, who had been supplying restaurants in the area for over 20 years. "Most new restaurant owners come in here with no idea what they're doing. You've thought of everything." As word spread through the small business community about Eleanor's restaurant project, people began to take notice. The local newspaper sent a reporter to interview her about the upcoming opening. Eleanor, who had once been nervous about speaking to anyone outside her immediate circle, found herself articulate and confident as she described her vision for the restaurant. "I want to create a place where people feel genuinely welcomed," Eleanor explained to the reporter, "where the food reminds them of home but also surprises them, where everyone who walks through the door feels valued and important." The reporter was charmed by Eleanor's warmth and impressed by her thorough preparation. The resulting article, titled "Local Woman Turns Lifelong Dream into Reality," featured Eleanor's photo and story prominently on the business page. Meanwhile, Marcus was struggling with a growing sense of unease. His work performance had begun to suffer as he found himself distracted by thoughts of his mother and their last conversation. The friends who had witnessed his cruel behavior were still keeping their distance, and his attempts to reconnect with them were met with polite but cold responses. David finally agreed to have coffee with Marcus, but the conversation was uncomfortable from the start. "I keep thinking about that night at your place," David said, stirring his coffee slowly. "That wasn't the Marcus I remember from college." "Look, maybe I was a little harsh, but she needed to understand boundaries," Marcus replied defensively. "Boundaries?" David shook his head. "Man, that woman worked herself to the bone to put you through school. She was like a second mother to all of us. Remember when I couldn't afford to fly home for Christmas junior year? She invited me to her tiny apartment and cooked for 3 days to make sure I had a real Christmas dinner." Marcus felt uncomfortable. He had forgotten about that Christmas and many other times when his mother had extended her generosity to his friends despite having very little money herself. She treated Jennifer like a daughter when Jennifer's parents got divorced senior year, David continued. "Your mom was there for all of us in ways our own families weren't, and you humiliated her in front of everyone." That same week, Marcus received a call from his Aunt Rita, Eleanor's younger sister who lived across the state. "Marcus, I just read the most wonderful article about your mother in her local newspaper," Rita said excitedly. "Did you know she's opening a restaurant?" The reporter made it sound absolutely amazing. Marcus was stunned. "A restaurant? What are you talking about? Haven't you spoken to her?" "Oh, Marcus, she's been working so hard on this project. The article says she's put together this incredible business plan and found the perfect location. I'm so proud of her for finally following her dreams." After the call ended, Marcus sat in stunned silence. His mother was opening a restaurant. The woman he had dismissed as ordinary and unremarkable was starting her own business. He immediately called Eleanor, but her phone went to voicemail. When she finally called him back hours later, she was brief and businesslike. "Yes, I'm opening a small restaurant," she confirmed. "It opens next month." "Mom, why didn't you tell me about this? I had no idea you were interested in running a business." "There are many things about me that you don't know, Marcus," Eleanor replied quietly. "I'm discovering that myself lately." Eleanor's transformation was not just professional, it was personal as well. She had begun taking better care of herself. buying clothes that made her feel confident and attractive instead of always choosing the cheapest options. She had her hair styled professionally for the first time in years and treated herself to small luxuries that she had always denied herself while saving money for Marcus's future. The woman who emerged from this period of intense focus and hard work was someone that even Eleanor herself was just getting to know. She discovered that she had natural leadership abilities, that she could inspire others to work hard, and that she had a gift for creating the kind of warm, welcoming atmosphere that made people want to return again and again. 3 weeks before the restaurant's opening, Eleanor hired her first employees. She chose carefully, looking for people who shared her vision of genuine hospitality and took pride in their work. Her head cook was Maria Santos, a talented chef who had been underemployed at a chain restaurant despite her exceptional skills. Her main server was James Mitchell, a young college student who impressed Eleanor with his genuine desire to make customers feel special. "Mrs. Thompson, I've worked for a lot of bosses," Maria told her during a training session, "but I've never worked for someone who cares so much about doing things right. This is going to be something special." Eleanor felt a deep satisfaction that she had never experienced before. For decades, she had poured all of her energy and attention into supporting Marcus's dreams and ambitions. Now, for the first time, she was building something that was entirely her own, something that reflected her values and her vision. As opening day approached, Eleanor found herself working 18-hour days, fine-tuning every detail of the restaurant's operation. She personally tested every recipe, trained each employee, and supervised the final touches on the dining room's warm, inviting decor. The local business community had taken notice of Eleanor's project, and several prominent community members had made reservations for opening night. The mayor's office had even contacted her about potentially featuring the restaurant in the city's tourism materials if the opening was successful. Eleanor stood in her nearly completed restaurant one evening, looking around at what she had accomplished in just a few months. The space that had once been empty and lifeless was now warm and inviting, filled with the promise of good food, genuine hospitality, and the kind of community connection that seemed increasingly rare in the modern world. For the first time in years, Eleanor felt truly proud of herself, not as Marcus's mother, but as Eleanor Thompson, a woman who had turned a long-time dream into reality through hard work, careful planning, and unwavering determination. She had proven that there was nothing ordinary about her life or her capabilities. The only sadness in this period of triumph was the absence of her son. Marcus had not visited the restaurant or offered to help with any aspect of the preparation. Eleanor missed him terribly, but she also recognized that his cruel words had been a wake-up call that she desperately needed. She had spent so many years defining herself solely through her relationship with Marcus that she had forgotten who Eleanor Thompson really was underneath the role of devoted mother. The morning of Eleanor's restaurant opening dawned bright and clear, as if the universe itself was celebrating her achievement. Eleanor arrived at Eleanor's table, the name she had chosen for her restaurant, at 5 a.m, 3 hours before her staff was scheduled to arrive. She wanted these quiet moments alone in the space she had created to prepare herself mentally for the day that would determine the success or failure of her lifelong dream. Walking through the dining room, Eleanor touched each table, straightened each chair, and adjusted the small vases of fresh flowers she had personally selected and arranged. The walls were decorated with warm, inviting colors and local artwork that she had chosen to create a sense of community and belonging. Soft jazz music played in the background, creating an atmosphere that was sophisticated yet comfortable, elegant yet accessible. The kitchen gleamed under the bright lights, every surface cleaned and organized according to Eleanor's exacting standards. She had spent weeks working with Maria to perfect each recipe on their carefully curated menu, testing and retesting until every dish met their shared vision of what comfort food could be when prepared with genuine care and high-quality ingredients. Eleanor's menu was a reflection of everything she had learned about food, hospitality, and what people truly wanted when they chose to dine out. There were elevated versions of classic comfort foods, her famous meatloaf with a gourmet mushroom gravy, mac and cheese made with artisanal cheeses and a crispy herb crust, and pot roast so tender it fell apart at the touch of a fork. But there were also surprising dishes that showcased Eleanor's creativity and extensive self-education in cooking techniques. A fusion pasta that combined her Italian research with Asian influences, and a signature dessert that reimagined traditional apple pie as an elegant tart with bourbon caramel sauce. By 8 in the morning, Eleanor's small but dedicated staff had arrived, each person bringing an excitement and energy that matched Eleanor's own. Maria immediately began preparing the day's specials, her skilled hands moving with confidence and precision. James reviewed the reservation list and discussed service strategies with Eleanor, demonstrating the professionalism and attention to detail that had impressed her during the hiring process. "Mrs. Thompson, I've been thinking about today since you hired me," James said, adjusting his crisp white shirt. "I want everyone who walks through that door to feel like they're the most important person in the world." Eleanor felt a surge of pride and gratitude for the team she had assembled. These people understood her vision and shared her commitment to creating something special. The first customers began arriving at 11:30, 30 minutes before the official opening time. Eleanor watched through the kitchen window as people gathered outside, some holding the newspaper article about the restaurant, others drawn by curiosity about the new establishment that had been the subject of so much local conversation. At exactly noon, Eleanor opened the doors of her restaurant for the first time. The mayor was among the first customers, along with several prominent business owners and community leaders who had made reservations after reading about Eleanor's project. But there were also regular working people, families looking for a nice lunch, elderly couples seeking a welcoming place to enjoy a meal together, and young professionals curious about the new neighborhood addition. Eleanor moved through the dining room with grace and confidence, greeting each table personally and ensuring that every customer felt welcomed and valued. She had always been naturally warm and caring, but now these qualities were enhanced by her newfound confidence and sense of purpose. "Mrs. Thompson, this meatloaf is incredible," said the mayor, whose political instincts were finely tuned to authentic quality. "I haven't tasted anything this good since my grandmother's cooking." At another table, an elderly couple sat holding hands and smiling as they enjoyed Eleanor's pot roast. The woman had tears in her eyes as she told her husband that the meal reminded her of her mother's Sunday dinners from 50 years ago. James moved through the dining room with professional efficiency, anticipating customers' needs and ensuring that service was smooth and attentive. Maria's food was consistently excellent, each dish perfectly prepared and beautifully presented. But the most remarkable thing about Eleanor's restaurant was not just the food or the service. It was the atmosphere she had created. Customers lingered over their meals, engaging in conversation with other diners at nearby tables. Strangers became friends over shared appreciation for Eleanor's cooking. The restaurant buzzed with the kind of genuine community connection that Eleanor had always dreamed of fostering. By mid-afternoon, word had spread throughout the community about the exceptional new restaurant. People were calling to make reservations for dinner, and several food bloggers had already posted glowing reviews on social media. The local newspaper's food critic arrived unannounced and spent 2 hours sampling multiple dishes, taking detailed notes with obvious enthusiasm. Eleanor's phone began ringing with interview requests from regional media outlets who had heard about the remarkable success of her opening day. Business owners from neighboring communities called to inquire about catering services and special events. Meanwhile, across town, Marcus was having the worst day of his professional career. A major client had just canceled a contract due to his recent distracted performance, and his boss had called him into a meeting to discuss his declining productivity. The success and confidence that had once defined Marcus's identity were crumbling, while his mother, the woman he had cruelly dismissed as ordinary, was achieving remarkable success. Robert, who had been at Marcus's apartment that awful evening, called him that afternoon with news that made Marcus's stomach drop. "Dude, you need to see this," Robert said. "Your mom's restaurant opened today and it's all over social media. Everyone's talking about how amazing it is. There are pictures of lines of people waiting to get in." Marcus immediately searched online and found dozens of posts about Eleanor's table. Food bloggers were calling it the most exciting restaurant opening in years. Customers were posting pictures of their meals with captions like, "This is what real hospitality looks like," and finally, "A restaurant that feels like home." The local newspaper's online article about the opening had already received hundreds of comments, all praising Eleanor's vision, her delicious food, and the welcoming atmosphere she had created. Several people mentioned how impressed they were by Eleanor's professionalism and business acumen, Marcus stared at his computer screen in shock. The photographs showed his mother looking confident and radiant, moving through her restaurant with the poise of an experienced businesswoman. This was not the simple, ordinary woman he had dismissed. This was Eleanor Thompson, successful entrepreneur and respected community member. As evening approached, Eleanor's restaurant was completely booked. Every table was occupied by customers enjoying her food and the warm atmosphere she had created. The staff was working at full capacity, but maintaining their high standards of service. Eleanor herself was everywhere, greeting customers, coordinating with the kitchen, ensuring that every detail met her exacting standards. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, Marcus's college friend who had witnessed his cruel behavior, arrived for dinner with her husband. She had made the reservation after seeing the social media posts about Eleanor's opening, curious about what Marcus's mother had accomplished. "Mrs. Thompson," Jennifer said when Eleanor approached their table. "I'm not sure if you remember me. I'm Jennifer. I was friends with Marcus in college." Eleanor's face lit up with genuine warmth. "Of course I remember you, dear. How wonderful to see you. I heard you became a doctor. I'm so proud of you." As Jennifer and her husband enjoyed their meal, they marveled at the transformation in Eleanor. This confident, accomplished woman bore little resemblance to the quiet, humble person Marcus had humiliated months earlier. "She's absolutely remarkable," Jennifer whispered to her husband. "Marcus has no idea what he threw away with his cruelty." By the time Eleanor's table closed at 10 o'clock that evening, the opening day had exceeded every expectation. The restaurant had served over 200 customers, received unanimous praise, and generated enough positive word of mouth to ensure weeks of full bookings. Eleanor stood in her kitchen after the last customer had left, surrounded by her exhausted but exhilarated staff. She had proven to herself and to her community that she was capable of extraordinary achievement. The ordinary life that Marcus had mocked was revealed to be anything but ordinary. It was the foundation for something truly special. As Eleanor drove home that night, she felt a deep satisfaction that came from knowing she had built something meaningful entirely. Through her own effort and vision, she had transformed not just an empty storefront, but herself, discovering capabilities and confidence she had never known she possessed. 2 weeks after Eleanor's triumphant restaurant opening, the full magnitude of her success had become impossible for Marcus to ignore. Eleanor's table was booked solid for the next month, and food critics from 3 neighboring cities had made the drive specifically to experience what local media were calling the most authentic dining experience in the region. Marcus sat in his expensive apartment, scrolling through endless social media posts about his mother's restaurant. The images showed Eleanor laughing with customers, confidently directing her staff and receiving a key to the city from the mayor in recognition of her contribution to the local business community. In every photograph, she radiated a confidence and joy that Marcus had never seen before. The woman in these pictures bore no resemblance to the simple, quiet mother he had dismissed as ordinary. This Eleanor Thompson was clearly a force to be reckoned with, a successful businesswoman who had earned the respect and admiration of her entire community. The odd contrast with Marcus's own recent struggles was stark and painful. His work performance continued to deteriorate as he became increasingly distracted and demoralized. The major client he had lost due to his poor focus had been his biggest account, and his boss was making pointed comments about the need for employees who could maintain their concentration on important projects. His personal relationships were in equally poor shape. The friends who had witnessed his cruel treatment of Eleanor continued to keep their distance. When they did interact with Marcus, their conversations were stilted and uncomfortable, lacking the easy camaraderie they had once shared. David had been the most direct about the situation during their last phone conversation. "Man, you really need to think about what you did. Your mom was always good to us and you humiliated her for no reason. That's not who I thought you were." Jennifer had been even more pointed. "I had dinner at your mother's restaurant last week, Marcus. She asked about you with such genuine concern and love even after how you treated her. Do you have any idea how remarkable she is?" The professional food critics were equally effusive in their praise. The restaurant reviewer for the regional newspaper wrote a glowing review that described Eleanor's table as a masterclass in genuine hospitality, where exceptional food is matched by an authentic warmth that reminds us why we fell in love with dining out in the first place. A prominent food blogger from the state capital made the 2-hour drive to experience Eleanor's restaurant and published a detailed review that went viral on social media. The review described Eleanor as a natural restaurateur with an intuitive understanding of what people want from a dining experience, and called her food comfort cuisine elevated to an art form. Most painful for Marcus was reading the interviews his mother had given to various media outlets. In these conversations, Eleanor came across as articulate, thoughtful, and remarkably well-informed about business, food trends, and hospitality management. She discussed her strategic approach to menu development, her philosophy of community building, and her long-term vision for the restaurant with the confidence of someone who had spent years preparing for this moment. "I believe that food is about more than nourishment," Eleanor had told one interviewer. "It's about creating connections, building community, and making people feel valued and cared for. That's what I've tried to create here, a place where everyone feels like they belong." When asked about her background and preparation for opening the restaurant, Eleanor had been characteristically humble but also proud of her journey. "I've been learning and planning for this for many years. I may not have formal training, but I have something just as valuable, a genuine desire to serve others and create something meaningful in my community." Marcus realized with growing horror that he had never really known his mother at all. He had seen only what he expected to see, a simple woman whose life revolved around him. He had never bothered to look deeper, to understand her intelligence, her dreams, or her capabilities. His arrogance had blinded him to the remarkable person who had been right in front of him his entire life. The breaking point came when Marcus received a call from his company's human resources department. His recent performance issues had culminated in a formal review, and he was being placed on a performance improvement plan. If he didn't show significant improvement within the next 60 days, he would be terminated. That same afternoon, Marcus learned that Eleanor's restaurant had been selected as the venue for the annual Chamber of Commerce Awards dinner, the most prestigious business event in the community. The same business leaders who Marcus had always tried to impress were now celebrating his mother's achievements, while his own career crumbled. Unable to bear the contrast any longer, Marcus drove to Eleanor's table that evening without calling ahead. He arrived during the dinner rush and was told by the hostess that there would be a 2-hour wait for a table. As he stood in the crowded waiting area, Marcus watched his mother move through the dining room with grace and authority, greeting customers by name and ensuring that every detail of their experience met her high standards. Eleanor spotted Marcus across the room, and their eyes met for the first time since that awful evening months ago. She approached him with the same professional demeanor she showed all her customers, but Marcus could see the wariness in her expression. "Hello, Marcus," she said politely. "I wasn't expecting to see you here." "Mom, I need to talk to you," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. The confident, arrogant tone that had characterized his cruel words months earlier was completely gone. Eleanor glanced around the busy restaurant. "I'm working right now, as you can see. Perhaps we could arrange a time to meet when I'm not serving customers." The formal distance in her voice was like a knife through Marcus's heart. This was his mother speaking to him as if he were a stranger, polite but detached, professional but not personal. "Please, Mom, just 5 minutes." "I know I don't deserve it, but I'm begging you." Eleanor studied her son's face and saw something there that gave her pause. The arrogance and superiority that had been so prominent during their last encounter were gone, replaced by genuine distress and what appeared to be the beginning of understanding. "Wait here," she said finally. "I'll be with you in a moment." Eleanor quickly checked with her staff to ensure everything was running smoothly, then led Marcus to a small office behind the kitchen. The space was organized and professional, with business plans and supplier contracts neatly filed, awards and positive reviews prominently displayed, and photographs of Eleanor with satisfied customers and community leaders. Marcus looked around the office in amazement. Everything about the space spoke to his mother's competence, success, and respected position in the business community. This was not the ordinary life he had so cruelly dismissed. This was evidence of extraordinary achievement. "Mom, I had no idea," Marcus began, but Eleanor held up her hand to stop him. "Marcus, I have a restaurant full of customers who are counting on me to provide them with excellent service. I can give you a few minutes, but then I need to get back to work." The business-like tone of her voice made Marcus realize how completely their relationship had changed. He was no longer the center of her world. no longer the most important person in her life. Eleanor had discovered her own worth and built her own success, and she no longer needed his approval or attention to feel valuable. "I was wrong," Marcus said, the words coming out in a rush. "Everything I said that night was wrong. I had no idea who you really are or what you're capable of. I was cruel and arrogant, and I hurt you terribly." Eleanor listened without responding, her expression neutral and professional. She had heard apologies before from people who had underestimated her, and she had learned to judge sincerity by actions rather than words. "I've been watching what you've accomplished," Marcus continued. "Reading the reviews, seeing the awards, learning about your success. Everyone in the community respects you. You've built something incredible, and I was too blind and selfish to see what an amazing person you are." "Marcus, I appreciate your words," Eleanor said carefully. "But I need you to understand something. I didn't create this restaurant to prove anything to you or to anyone else. I did it for myself, because I finally realized that I deserved to pursue my own dreams instead of always putting everyone else's needs first." The truth of her words hit Marcus like a physical blow. His mother's success had nothing to do with him. It was about her own self-discovery and self-worth. She had not been trying to teach him a lesson or get revenge for his cruelty. She had simply decided to value herself enough to pursue her own happiness. "Can you ever forgive me?" Marcus asked, tears beginning to form in his eyes. Eleanor was quiet for a long moment, studying her son's face. She could see that his remorse was genuine, but she also understood that forgiveness would not automatically restore their relationship to what it had been before. Too much had changed, both in her own sense of self and in her expectations for how she deserved to be treated. "Marcus, forgiveness is something that takes time," she said finally. "What you said that night wasn't just cruel. It revealed how little respect you had for me as a person. That kind of damage doesn't heal overnight." Marcus nodded, understanding that he had lost something precious that might never be fully restored. The weeks following Marcus's emotional conversation with Eleanor marked the beginning of the most challenging period of his adult life. His mother's words about forgiveness taking time echoed in his mind as he struggled to rebuild not just their relationship, but his entire understanding of himself and what truly mattered in life. Marcus's first step was to address his failing career. The performance improvement plan at work forced him to confront how his arrogance and lack of focus had damaged his professional reputation. He began working longer hours, paying closer attention to detail, and treating his colleagues with more respect. Slowly, his performance began to improve, though he knew it would take time to fully restore his standing at the company. But more importantly, Marcus began to educate himself about his mother's life and achievements. He read every article and review about Eleanor's table, learning about her business philosophy, her commitment to community service, and the respect she had earned from customers and fellow business owners. Each piece of information revealed another layer of his mother's character that he had never bothered to explore. Marcus discovered that Eleanor had been quietly volunteering at the local food bank for over a decade, using her cooking skills to help feed families in need. She had organized fundraising dinners for various community charities, always working behind the scenes without seeking recognition. Several scholarship recipients from the local high school mentioned Eleanor's financial support in their thank you letters that Marcus found mentioned in community newsletters. The more Marcus learned about his mother's community, involvement, and generosity, the more ashamed he became of his previous blindness to her character. Eleanor had been making a positive difference in countless lives while he had been focused solely on his own success and social status. 3 weeks after their difficult conversation, Marcus made a decision that would have been unthinkable during his period of arrogance. He called Eleanor's restaurant and asked if he could speak with her about the possibility of volunteering. He wanted to contribute to her success without expecting anything in return, to show through actions rather than words that he was beginning to understand the value of service to others. Eleanor was surprised by the request but agreed to meet with Marcus after the restaurant closed one evening. When he arrived, she was finishing the day's paperwork, surrounded by receipts, supplier invoices, and scheduling charts that demonstrated the complexity of running a successful business. "You want to volunteer here?" Eleanor asked, studying her son's face for signs of ulterior motives. "What exactly are you proposing?" "Whatever you need," Marcus replied humbly. I could wash dishes, bus tables, help with inventory. I know I don't have experience in the restaurant business, but I'm willing to learn. I want to contribute to what you've built here, and I want to understand the work you do." Eleanor was quiet for several minutes, considering his offer. She had been managing with a small staff, and extra help would certainly be useful during busy periods, but more importantly, she recognized that this might be Marcus's genuine attempt to understand her world and demonstrate his respect for her accomplishments. "If you're serious about this," Eleanor said finally, "then you can start by helping James with table service on weekends. You'll need to learn our standards for customer service, and you'll be representing my restaurant. That means treating every customer with respect and care, regardless of who they are or what they order." Marcus eagerly accepted the opportunity, not fully realizing how challenging it would be to transition from his previous role as a demanding customer to someone responsible for serving others. His first weekend at Eleanor's table was a humbling experience that opened his eyes to the skill and dedication required for excellent hospitality. James patiently taught Marcus the basics of table service, from properly setting places to anticipating customers' needs. Marcus quickly discovered that providing genuine hospitality required constant attention, physical stamina, and the ability to remain cheerful and professional, even when dealing with difficult customers. "Remember," James explained as they prepared for the dinner rush, "Mrs. Thompson always says that every person who walks through that door should feel like the most important person in the world. That means really listening to what they need and going the extra mile to make their experience special." Marcus watched in amazement as Eleanor moved through the dining room during busy periods, remembering regular customers' names and preferences, checking on tables to ensure satisfaction, and handling complaints with grace and professionalism. She made it look effortless, but Marcus was beginning to understand the depth of skill and experience required to create the warm, welcoming atmosphere that defined Eleanor's table. During his first month of volunteering, Marcus made numerous mistakes. He spilled drinks, mixed up orders, and struggled to keep up with the pace during busy periods. But Eleanor's staff patiently helped him improve, and Eleanor herself offered quiet encouragement when she saw him, genuinely trying to provide good service. The most transformative moment came when Marcus was serving an elderly couple who reminded him of his grandparents. The man was celebrating his 80th birthday, and his wife had chosen Eleanor's table because she had heard about the restaurant's reputation for making special occasions memorable. Marcus found himself genuinely invested in ensuring that their evening was perfect. He coordinated with the kitchen to prepare their meals exactly to their preferences, arranged for a special dessert with a candle, and spent time talking with them about their long marriage and family. When they left, both the man and woman thanked Marcus with tears in their eyes, saying that his attention had made the celebration truly special. For the first time in years, Marcus felt the deep satisfaction that comes from genuinely serving others without expectation of personal gain. He understood why his mother found such fulfillment in her work. It wasn't just about running a business. It was about creating moments of joy and connection for other people. Eleanor had been quietly observing Marcus's progress, noting his growing humility and genuine effort to provide good service. She saw him staying late to help with cleanup, offering to come in on his days off when the restaurant was particularly busy, and treating every customer with the same respect, regardless of their background or status. After 2 months of consistent volunteering, Eleanor invited Marcus to join her for coffee after closing one evening. They sat in the quiet dining room, surrounded by the evidence of another successful day of service. "I've been watching you work," Eleanor said softly. "I can see that you're trying to understand what this place means to me and why I find it fulfilling." Marcus nodded. "Mom, I never understood before how much skill and care goes into making people feel welcomed and valued. What you've created here is really beautiful. It's not just a restaurant. It's a place where people feel connected and cared for." Eleanor smiled, the first genuinely warm smile she had given her son since their relationship had been damaged. "That's exactly what I hope to create. I wanted a place where everyone could feel important and appreciated. I'm sorry it took me so long to see what an amazing person you are," Marcus continued. "I was so focused on my own success and status that I completely missed the fact that you were already successful in the most important ways. You were making a positive difference in people's lives every day. For the first time in months, Eleanor reached across the table and took her son's hand. Marcus, I can see that you're genuinely trying to change, and I appreciate the effort you've put into understanding my work. But I need you to know that this process isn't just about earning my forgiveness. It's about you becoming a better person. Marcus squeezed his mother's hand gently. I know, Mom, and I want to keep learning. I want to be someone you can be proud of, not because of my job title or salary, but because of how I treat other people. Eleanor looked at her son with a mixture of hope and caution. The healing of their relationship would be a long process, but she could see the genuine changes in Marcus's character. The arrogant, dismissive man who had humiliated her months earlier was being replaced by someone more humble, more caring, and more aware of what truly mattered in life. Would you like to continue volunteering here? Eleanor asked. Not because you feel obligated, but because you genuinely want to be part of what we're doing? More than anything, Marcus replied. I want to learn from you, Mom. I want to understand how to serve others the way you do, and I want to be part of something meaningful. As they sat together in the quiet restaurant, surrounded by empty tables that would soon be filled again with customers seeking good food and genuine hospitality, both Eleanor and Marcus understood that they were beginning a new chapter in their relationship. It would be built not on obligation or guilt, but on mutual respect, shared values, and a commitment to serving others with dignity and care. The journey toward complete reconciliation would take time, but for the first time since that awful evening months ago, both mother and son felt hopeful about their future together. Eleanor had discovered her own strength and independence, while Marcus was learning the true meaning of humility and service. Together, they were building something far more valuable than Marcus's former success or status, the